Welcome back, Defenders. Happy Easter. If you didn't have to work this weekend, I hope you were able to spend some time with family and friends. Unfortunately for Ukraine, this was not a happy Easter. Since the start of the full-scale invasion, Russia has destroyed over 600 churches and religious sites across Ukraine. This is not an accident. This is deliberate. I don't understand why this doesn't get more attention from the global Christian community. The Russians for 3 years have been systematically destroying churches and congregations to replace them with the Russian Eastern Orthodox Church, a fake church that Putin and the Kremlin 100% controls. But Putin gets away with it because he does symbolic stuff like this. Putin orders an Easter ceasefire as Russia and Ukraine exchange hundreds of POWs. Russia didn't negotiate this. Putin just announced it. From his bunker in the Kremlin, while gripping the table so his hand doesn't shake, Putin announced a 36-hour ceasefire across the front lines. Why? Why would he do this? Other than to pretend like he's a good Christian who cares about Christian values when he doesn't. This is manipulation, this is propaganda. And Zelensky says, show us it's real. Russia's done this before. Russia in Christmas of 2023 announced a 36-hour ceasefire and then ignored it. So sure enough, nobody in the Russian military listens to their own supreme allied commander if he actually did send out the order. Russia continues attacking Ukraine despite its own declared Easter truce. A truce they didn't tell Zelensky about, a truce that Ukraine didn't agree to, but Ukraine tried to adhere to it so they could document Russia's violations. But it didn't matter. There were air raid alarms, missiles and drones being launched against Kyiv and Donetsk, as well as Dnipro, Zaporizhia, and Kharkiv. The Russians lie about absolutely everything, including their Easter ceasefires. Here's a picture of an apartment building in Dnipro that was struck with a Shahed drone after Putin announced his ceasefire. Wasn't real. But it is interesting. Given all this talk of a permanent or 30-day ceasefire across the front lines, Ukraine has offered this. Ukraine proposes to extend the Easter truce for another 29 days. Why not? The corresponding proposal for a full and unconditional 30-day ceasefire has gone unanswered by the Russians for 39 days. The United States made this proposal, Ukraine responded positively, but Russia has ignored it. Because Ukraine agreed to this unconditional 30-day ceasefire, and they did this 40 days ago, Zelensky can just keep repeating himself. This is what Donald Trump and the United States wanted 40 days ago, and the Russians have just been ignoring Ukraine and ignoring Donald Trump and the United States. So then we get to this point. This was kind of inevitable. The United States will abandon Ukraine peace talks within days, if no progress is being made, according to Marco Rubio. Trump threatens to withdraw from Ukraine peace talks unless a deal is reached very soon. Not our war. U.S. may exit Ukraine peace talks if there's no breakthrough. Here are the relevant clips. The first one's Secretary of State Rubio and then Donald Trump saying they're ready just to give up.
If we're so far apart that this is not going to happen, then I think the president's probably at a point where he's going to say, well, we're done. We're not going to continue with this endeavor for weeks and months on end. So we need to determine very quickly now, and I'm talking about a matter of days, whether or not this is doable.
Marco is right in saying it. We want to see it end. If for some reason one of the two parties makes it very difficult, we're just going to say you're foolish, you're fools, you're horrible people, and we're going to just take a pass.
If for some reason one of the two parties makes it difficult, we're just going to take a pass. That is what the President of the United States, who's supposed to be the most powerful man in the world, the leader of the free world, is just saying, well, if one side makes it difficult, we're just going to give up. Russia is the aggressor. Russia invaded Ukraine. Ukraine is defending themselves. Ukraine is fighting off a genocide. And Trump is saying, well, if the Russians make it difficult for us to get a ceasefire or a peace proposal, then we're just going to give up on both sides. Very convenient if you never supported Ukraine in the first place. And this is really weird and stupid from a diplomatic standpoint, because peace talks and negotiations to end wars are never fast. They're never simple. They're never easy. The negotiations for the Paris Peace Accords to end the Vietnam War, they began in 1968 and they weren't signed until 1973. These peace talks to end the Vietnam War lasted for 5 years, and Donald Trump couldn't even make it 100 days without getting bored and frustrated and deciding to give up. There's also this weirdness of Steve Witkoff being in charge of everything for Donald Trump. Even the best diplomat in the world, the best diplomat in history, could not handle negotiations with Russia, Iran, and Israel-Palestine all at the same time. Steve Witkoff should be assigned to just one and have someone else run the point on the other accounts. Steve Witkoff is an idiot, but he's Donald Trump's golfing buddy from Mar-a-Lago, and he has no diplomatic experience, no experience in government, and Donald Trump has made Steve Witkoff in charge of negotiating with the Israelis, the Palestinians, the Iranians, and the Russians, all at the same time. And he's an idiot. So the only thing that Steve Witkoff and Donald Trump can think of is to just give the Russians more. If you've been watching these videos the last 3 months, it's just concession after concession, carrot after carrot. We're not using the stick with the Russians. It's only carrots with Russians. U.S. proposed sanctions relief. The United States is placing pressure on the Europeans to lift sanctions on the Russians. And this is the most shocking headline. The United States is ready to recognize Crimea as Russian in Trump-push peace deal. Not even China recognizes Crimea as belonging to Russia. Iran doesn't recognize Crimea as belonging to Russia. The only countries that recognize Crimea as belonging to Russia, Belarus and North Korea. This is how out of touch and stupid. I mean, everyone in this government is just stupid. And they so desperately want this. MAGA and Donald Trump so desperately want to just be best friends with Vladimir Putin and the Russians. They view them as ideological kin. And they'll give them anything. They'll surrender America to the Russians if Putin just wants to be their friend. We have to give up on the United States as an American, as a service veteran, a 3-generation service veteran. The United States isn't going to be any help to anyone until Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and Elon Musk are removed from our government. So here's the good news. The EU could replace US aid to Ukraine with a 0.2% GDP increase in aid. This was revealed by the Kiel Institute. An increased contribution of a mere 0.21% of the EU's annual GDP would be sufficient to compensate for a loss in aid from the United States. And this is true. The European Union and other G7 allies, they have the money, they have the resources to defeat the Russians, even without the United States. Now, yes, there are certain weapon platforms that are really nice that the United States could supply, but honestly, warfare is changing. These domestically produced cheap drones are making heavier, more expensive systems obsolete. Would Ukraine still like to have them? Heck yeah, but we're going to have to fight the Russians with what we have. Now, concerning the United States, I know people are very concerned. We are a very large and powerful country, best military in the world, largest economy. For the United States to become an autocracy, a hostile dictatorship, yes, this is very concerning. I'm very concerned, guys. But we're moving in the right direction. And what is saving us is that everyone that Donald Trump is appointing to these important positions, they're idiots. Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, he was the weekend host of Fox and Friends, and he's an alcoholic. And this is who Trump put in charge of the military. There is a complete meltdown in the building. Pentagon reportedly in chaos as Hegseth loses 4 staffers in a single day. The Pentagon has been beset by a series of leaks in recent weeks, including the disclosure of military plans for the Panama Canal, U.S. carrier movements in the Middle East threatening Iran, the halting of intelligence gathering on behalf of Ukraine, and a briefing at the Pentagon with Elon Musk. The shakeup comes as Hegseth was at the center of a scandal involving a group chat with government officials on Signal. These people are all idiots, and thankfully, commissioned officers working at the Pentagon know these men are a danger. There is information leaking from the Pentagon every single day. This is a crime. This is against the UCMJ. These military officers cannot publicly speak out. If they publicly speak out, they're going to be arrested and prosecuted, but they're trying to save our democracy. You're not going to hear them. You're not going to know their names unless Trump names them. But the people who took an oath to our Constitution are fighting for our democracy right now. We are seeing and experiencing it every day. And Donald Trump is not going to get away with this. And we're also lucky, once again, the man in charge is the dumbest one of all. Trump's approval rating on the economy drops to the lowest of his presidency, both his first term and this term. These tariffs were really dumb, and there's a lot of people in the United States very upset about them. This is disrupting small businesses. This is hurting everyone's 401ks. So here it is. Here is the approval and disapproval rating averages. It's a range. So these are the composites put together by VoteHub. And I know what you're saying. 45%, how is it still so high? But Donald Trump is dropping at about 1 percentage point a week. 1% of Americans changing their mind and flipping on Donald Trump. That represents 1.5 million Americans. Every week that Donald Trump has been president, we've gone from 1.5 million Americans have said, I approve of Trump, to I disapprove of Trump. You can see this steep drop here when he introduced all the tariffs. Why does this matter? Why does presidential approval matter if he's now a dictator? And he's actually not a dictator yet. He's trying to be, but he needs the cooperation. He needs the complicity of military leaders and business leaders. And military and business leaders are not going to do this for Trump if he's not popular. Dictators require military and business leaders to commit crimes for them to consolidate power. People are only willing to break the law for a dictator if they think he will stay in power forever and can protect them from future prosecution. This is why Donald Trump and Steve Bannon are talking about the 2028 election and how, even though Donald Trump is 80 years old, they're claiming he's never going to die and he's never going to leave office. He's just going to stay in power forever. So it's okay to ignore the courts and break the law to help Donald Trump consolidate. But the weaker Trump is, the more people will just tell him no when Trump asks them to break the law because they don't believe Trump will be able to stay in office forever. Trump won't be able to protect Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos or Tim Cook if they collaborate, if they're willing to break the law to help Donald Trump in any way over the next 4 years. So we need to protest. It's working. Anti-Trump protests sweep America for the second time in weeks. This was the April 19th protest. The organization, it's a spectrum, guys. There's many organizations participating and organizing. I think the most broad one is 5051. If you want to Google them, you can figure out when and where your next local protest is. I can link some of these videos down below, but let me show you the size of some of these crowds. This is the city of Providence, Rhode Island. Huge crowd turnout. This, I think, is going to be, this is the city of Chicago. Massive, massive crowds taking to the streets, protesting Donald Trump and Elon Musk. This is St. Paul, Minneapolis. Once again, guys, these crowds, this has to be tens of thousands of people gathering in the big cities. Minneapolis, St. Paul, the Twin Cities is close to, I think, 3 million people. This is New York City. This is Manhattan. And yeah, you would expect very large crowds in New York City. Let me show you a couple more. This is Boston. Boston, I think, had the largest protest from the one 2 weeks ago, and I have no idea how many people could possibly be in this crowd. It is massive. And I also participated. Here in Las Vegas, we had a local protest at the federal courthouse, and I would guess a couple thousand people showed up. I'm not quite sure. I tried, kind of counting with my my finger, but people come and go. People will show up for a couple hours and then take off, but the entire span of the protest was all afternoon. And if you didn't see my shorts, I posted it on all my social media, but here's me at the April 9th protest here in Las Vegas.
Hey Defenders, I'm currently at my local protest against Donald Trump and Elon Musk here at the federal courthouse in Las Vegas. We're close to Fremont Street if you know the city. I've been standing out here in the sun for about an hour and people keep filing in. The crowd continues to grow. If I had to guess, rough estimate how many people are here, it's got to be over 10,000. They've lined the streets on both sides, and anytime someone drives by and they agree with what we're protesting, they give us a honk and it fires up the crowd. For this protest, I decided to wear my 741st Missile Squadron. This is the Gravel Haulers. This is the squadron I was a part in when I served at Minot Air Force Base for 4 years. And rather than making a sign, I just brought an American flag. We're fighting to save the country. At the moment, Donald Trump is defying a 9-0 Supreme Court ruling saying that he's a dictator. He can do whatever he wants. He can just disappear any American citizen he wants to a gulag in El Salvador. So it's important that Americans rise up, Americans take to the streets, they let their representatives know, call, write letters, show up at protests. It's going to be a fight, but it's a fight we have to do to save our democracy.
Protests are pretty loud, so they're not great for recording videos. And I did see numerous Ukrainian flags there. I saw at least a dozen, small or large. And what is bringing these protesters together? It was a range of issues. People who care about Social Security or Medicare, LGBT rights, refugees, immigrants. I saw a lot of people there protesting about the national parks, and I wasn't even tracking that issue, but everyone coming out, they have their specific issues they care about, but they're willing to, I think, have solidarity for everyone and their issues who are opposing Donald Trump and Elon Musk right now. So the organization, if you want to get involved, if you want to attend your next local protest, it's 5051. I think the next protest is either going to be May 1st or May 4th, but these are going to get bigger. They're going to continue to grow through the summer as Donald Trump becomes even more despised by the American people. I'm going to make a prediction, guys. Nothing is going to get better here in the United States. The economy, global affairs, all the wars happening around the world. Donald Trump and his team are going to make everything worse, to the point where 6 months from now, we're going to look back on today and wish we could go back in time because things were so good today. That's the direction this country is going. So I know for my non-American viewers, You want to know how does this end? And I think Donald Trump and J.D. Vance will be removed from office one way or another by next summer. So we're probably going to have another year of this. Mass protesting, mass rioting, Donald Trump doing some insane fascist stuff, but America needs to go through this, honestly. Like, we need to have a wake-up call because our government is broken in many ways. It's been broken for a very long time. It doesn't serve the interests of the people, and this shouldn't have been possible. What Donald Trump did to get back in office, just lying about everything, it shouldn't have been possible. I can keep mentioning this, but this is the good news of Donald Trump. Trump accidentally hits Putin's oil budget with a $20 billion bomb. And Russia has serious financial problems. Analysts estimate that for every $10 drop in oil, Russia loses about $17 billion annually. Oil revenue accounts for about a third of Russia's total budget. So to compensate, the Russian government is resorting to measures such as tapping remaining reserves. I think Putin has been raiding the National Pension Fund to pay for this war, increasing domestic borrowing, and introducing tax hikes on high-income individuals and corporations. However, these strategies may not be sustainable with combined high military spending and volatile energy prices. We've never been closer to an economic collapse of Russia, and the chaos caused by Donald Trump could accelerate that. China's also not really helping. China spikes Kremlin's proposed Power of Siberia 2 alternative, and for 3 years, Russia has been desperate to get the Chinese to build this Power of Siberia 2 pipeline to China. All of Russia's pipeline infrastructure went to Europe. Russia then declared war on their best customers. And if the Chinese wanted to do this, they would just do it. It's been 3 years. China could easily have built this pipeline. They're choosing not to. They're choosing not to, which is hilarious to watch. So China only cares about China. And if there's some kind of economic or political collapse of Russia, then China will seize on that opportunity. Black Sea oil spill renders Russian resorts unfit for summer vacation, top health official warns. Do you remember those 2 oil tankers that sank last winter or fall? Oil is still washing up on the beaches in Russia. It's been 6 months, so all the oil has kind of like calcified into these pellets, but these pellets every day just keep washing up on the beaches. This is probably going to go on for a very long time. Here's an interesting video I want to share with you. This is a new Russian-developed tactic for the battlefield. And Russia more and more has been relying on motorcycles. So Ukraine has been putting down more barbed wire to halt Russian advances. And this is Russia's genius strategy to get over the barbed wire. Now, you might be tempted to think that's a good idea. That's actually pretty smart. But do you know what goes over barbed wire better than a motorcycle? A tank, or any tracked armored vehicle. Russia was supposed to have 10,000 tanks. Where are their tanks, Russia? Where are your armored vehicles? Why are you coming up with new tactics for motorcycles to go on assault and get over barbed wire? When these men are exposed, everything kills a man on a motorcycle on the front lines in Ukraine. No protection. Let's get to the good news for Ukraine. Japan to provide Ukraine with $3 billion from frozen Russian assets. This is Japan's contribution from the G7 loan. Thank you so much to the Japanese. This is always good news. Russia and Ukraine swap 500 prisoners of war in what might be the biggest exchange yet to date. Some of these Ukrainian defenders had been in captivity for 3 years, and they finally got to come home. Let me share with you this clip of all the defenders getting off the bus. Some of these guys had been in captivity for 3 years. It's good to see them come home. Final clip I have for you is from Maria Avdiva back in the city of Kharkiv, showing you that Kharkiv still stands strong.
Do you know any other city where after horrendous Russian attack, city workers will go outside on the street to plant beautiful flowers? This city is Kharkiv. Russia attacked Kharkiv with 3 Iskander missiles this morning with cluster warheads to injure and kill as many as possible. But here are the flowers, because Kharkiv stands strong. People here are resilient and resistant, and people here will never surrender. Slava Ukraini!
That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.